Welcome everyone to this video, and today I'm going to show you how I set up my Canon R6 for wildlife photography, and specifically how I set up the autofocus system. Now this camera has been around for a good couple of years, and there's so many good tutorials out there on YouTube and on the internet, but hopefully this will help you out if you have just got an R6, or maybe, as I know a few of my viewers are in a situation where they're thinking of upgrading from a DSLR maybe to this camera. And also this should help you if you just bought a Canon R6 Mark II. It'll be pretty similar. Now what I'm going to show you, by no means am I saying you should set the camera up like this. There's so many different ways you can do it. That's one of the good things about these kind of cameras. There's so many options for configurations, so you can fine tune it to your shooting technique and how you want to focus. I'm going to take you step by step as how I've got it currently set up. So we're going to get straight into it, and the first thing I'm going to show you maybe seems a little bit out of order, but I think if you do it this way it's going to help later on, and that's to make sure that you've got the eye focus enabled. So what I'm going to do is go into the menu and to the autofocus tab, and then I'm going to go to AF method, and in there I'm going to select the tracking. So it kind of says L, looks a bit like a smiley face, tracking mode there. And then we're going to go down and you'll see eye detection, and I'm going to make sure that that eye detection is enabled. Now we're going to select the servo autofocus. So in AF operation we're going to change this to servo, and I haven't really felt the need to use one shot as yet. Servo is your tracking, your continuous autofocus. Now this is how I've got my focus set up now, which I'm using back button, which I'll explain later on. So if you go into here, AF method, currently got it set on the eye tracking because we made that adjustment earlier on, but this one I've got set up for kind of a standard focus. So I think of this as like my main focus, kind of like I would with the DSLR, my main focus, and it's just a case of which one you want to choose that you feel comfortable with. So I've currently got the spot autofocus that I'm using. So that's kind of my main focus, and then if I want to override that, I'm going to use the eye detection. Subject to detect. If you're photographing wildlife, then I would definitely suggest you go to animals, and that seems to have worked so far for me. Continuous AF, this is important. You want to put this on disabled. So if you have continuous AF on enable, what that basically does, it's constantly trying to focus. So even when you're not photographing, you don't want to focus, even if you're walking around, the lens is constantly searching, trying to focus. So that one I would definitely say disable. Movie servo is pretty much what it says, similar thing, but if you're filming, if you're doing video, so I'm actually leaving that on enable. Now touch and drag settings, this basically means you can focus with the screen, so you can put your finger or thumb onto the screen to focus where you want. Really useful if you want to use a screen. So I've got that enabled. I'm not really too sure about these. I've just left these as they were. Manual focus, I'm not dealing with that in this video. Haven't even tried that, to be honest, so maybe in another video. Now we come to the cases. So servo autofocus. You'll see as you go down, 1, 2, 3, 4 cases, and each case has a slightly different tracking sensitivity and acceleration decel. You'll see they're all slightly different in the way it's set up. Now the tracking sensitivity, this really is, kind of think of it as how well the focus point sticks on the subject. So if you're photographing a bird in flight, how well does it stay on there? Does it stay locked on, or if you get onto the background, does it quickly lock onto the background? So you can change that depending on your preference. I made a video on this a few years ago, advanced birds in flight photography, or I went into it in quite a lot of detail on what these different cases mean. So the main one to look at, I would say, is tracking sensitivity. Definitely makes a difference. Acceleration, deceleration, I'm not too sure. It should make a difference, but it's sometimes hard to test. Personally, I'm doing the same as I did before, and I'm leaving mine in case one. I feel like it probably suits my shooting style best. Now what have we got here? One shot AF release. This, if you're using one shot, it's a case of how quickly does it focus. So if you have it on release, then the camera may fire before it's fully confirmed focus. If you have it on focus, as I have, it means that it won't actually take a picture until the camera thinks it's 100% in focus, locked on. So I'm leaving that on focus priority. Switching track subjects. I haven't changed this one. This is really, if you're using a focus points that allow you to switch, if something comes into the frame and it can change quickly, then this is basically how quickly can it do that. So I'm not too sure about this. I'm actually going to put it on 1. Let's put it in the middle for now. Next we have lens drive when autofocus impossible. So if it's struggling to focus, basically you can have an option of stopping it from searching, so it just stops, or you can have it just continuously trying to focus all the time. So I've got mine, I'm leaving that on for the moment. And then we have limiting autofocus methods. This means if there's certain types of autofocus area that you never use, then you can switch them off. So at the moment you could cycle through all, you know, there's all these different ones here, but if there's some that you never use, then you can actually basically switch them off so you don't have to go through, so it can save you some time. So I've just switched a few of these off that I don't think I really need. I mean, I've probably never even used the large zone one, but the less you have to cycle through if you do it that way, then the more time you're basically saving. Next we're coming to orientation linked autofocus point, which sounds really exciting. Now this is really useful actually. So this is to do with if you're shooting, say, horizontally, and then you go to shoot vertically, do the focus points stay in the same place or do they move? So if you have it on the same for both horizontal and vertical, then let's say you have a focus point at the top of the frame shooting horizontally. When you go to turn the camera vertically, that focus point is going to stay in the same place, so it's going to be on the left hand side of the frame. If we put it on separate AF points, point only, the second one, this means now if I'm shooting, I've got a top focus point, maybe I'm photographing an animal, it's closer to the head, it's better for composition. It means that if I then turn the camera vertically, that focus point is actually going to jump to the top of the frame. So you've got a focus point at the top of the frame, whether it's horizontal or vertical. So this shouldn't matter with the eye tracking, but if you're using one of the others, I think it will come into play. And the thing I found, it's a little bit confusing to me how it works, but it seemed to work on a kind of memory. So I found if I took some shots, changed the focus points, turned it and took some shots again, after that, when I went to turn the camera, the focus point did keep moving. So have a play around with that, but I've definitely got mine set on the separate one, separate AF points. Right, next one is a bit of a complicated one. I don't know this in depth, I haven't tested it enough. But the initial AF point set, and then it's got the symbols, the tracking, kind of a focus point as well. This seems to do with how much control you have about where the camera is going to start tracking from. That's as I understand it. So in terms of the eye focus, which has been really good so far on this camera, I think if you have it on auto, then I think the camera's more likely to pick any face. So if you had a group of people, for example, you probably have less control of where it's going to pick, which eye it's going to focus on. If you choose one of the other two, then I just think you have a little bit more control over where you can put the focus point and which face, which eye that you specifically want to photograph. So that can definitely be useful if you've got a group of animals, a group of birds. It's going to be better if you can be more specific, in my opinion. So I'm going to play around with that one. For the moment, I've got it on the top one. And then we have sensitivity of AF point, and I'm not too sure about this. I guess it's just how sensitive that focus point is. You can sort of tone it down a bit. I've just got mine on plus at the moment. Well, next we're going to come to setting up the dual back button focus. Now again, I'm not saying that you should necessarily set it up this way. I've got it set up this way for now and it's working pretty well for me. Doesn't mean I'm going to stick with it. So we're going to go across, I want to go across the tabs to this camera one kind of looks like it's got dots underneath it, and to number 3. And we want customize buttons, and this is where you can assign a function for almost pretty much every button on the camera for what you want it to do, so you can configure it how you want. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deactivate focus from the shutter button. I don't want the shutter button to focus, so at the moment it says metering and autofocus start. I'm just going to select metering, so it will still do metering, take the picture, but it won't do any autofocus. Next is AF on, the AF on button, and this is this button here, this slightly bigger one at the top, and I'm going to select this one. This is quite important, I think. I'm going to select this for my autofocus option. It also does metering, that's fine. So I'm going to select metering and AF start, and I'll come back to that in a bit. And then we come to the eye autofocus. So I want to have my eye autofocus set up on the star button, this little button here. So I've got it set up at the moment, it's working fairly well. So we're going to star, and we are going to assign this button to the eye tracking. And there it is, it says eye detection, and it's got a little eye, so it makes it obvious. I'm going to select that. We now have this little star button is assigned to do our eye autofocus. And then also this little button here, this is this button on the outside. It says at the moment AF point selection. Now I like that, I'm leaving it as that. I'll show you why. If we come out of here, if we press this little button, you see it comes up with these different options, and if we press the button on the top, it cycles through. So it's cycling through the different focus options, different focus areas basically. So you can change that very quickly in the viewfinder, as opposed to how we did it earlier by going into the menu. So there we've basically set up 2 buttons for focus on the back, dual back button focus. The bigger AF on button is kind of like a standard focus, and then the star is the eye tracking, the eye autofocus. And at the moment I'm using the eye focus most of the time. I'm finding it to be pretty good a large percentage of the time. So if I want to use that, I'll keep my thumb engaged on that, and it will constantly be trying to look for an eye, and hopefully it'll focus on there. If it doesn't quite make the eye, then a lot of the time I think it makes the head, so it's pretty accurate. Now if I'm in a situation where it's a bit busy, the surroundings or the background, and it's just not working and I can tell, then I have the option to move my thumb across to the AF on button and to try that one. And if I'm using a spot, I've got it on spot focus for that. So it has worked so far fairly well, and I found what a lot of people do, and I've already started doing it, is sometimes if the eye focus is struggling, then you can kind of use the other button, the other type of focus, to pick up the subject first and then go to the eye focus. So it's almost like using it as an assist. I know a lot of people have told me they've done that. I've already found that's helping sometimes. And just to say, the way I've set up the buttons, you don't have to have them that way round. You could have them the opposite way round. You could have the AF on button as your eye focus, and you could have the star button as your other type of focus. And there's so many options. You could even use the shutter button as well if you want to. There's so many configurations, and just to say thank you to all the comments I had in previous videos about how you can set it up. I'm going to give a shout out to Clive, who's been a subscriber for a long time, and to Robert, who I thought were really good suggestions. Some excellent suggestions in there, including how you can use the shutter button and back button for different types of focus. I have mostly been using the eye focus, the eye tracking for most of my wildlife photography with this for the past few weeks, and I'm really impressed. Quite surprised as well how well the eye focus has worked, even on older lenses like this EF 400mm. So you can take an EF lens and, you know, get very, very good results with the eye tracking system. Now, I've tried it in different situations, some easy, some very difficult. I'd say I'm probably getting about 80%. I'd put it around 80% probably success rate in terms of sharpness, in terms of like critically sharp, pin sharp images. If you have any thoughts on how to set it up for back button focus, drop them in the comments box below, not just for me, but for other viewers. I think it's so good to share, particularly with things like this, where there's so many different options of how you can set it up. And if you come across a way that suits you, it just makes your life easier, you can get most out of the camera, and really configure it to your shooting style. If you're not subscribed, please click on the subscribe button for more tutorials. Share the video if you enjoyed it, that really helps this channel. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.